to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Give it a big round of applause. Hi, I'm Tony Bell. I am the president and CEO of Phoenix Consulting Company, a boutique IO psych firm that focuses on current and emerging leaders. We help them rise. I'm also a member of the CMC Board of Trustees, and it's a fun place to be. For all you visitors, if you get a call from me, answer the call and say yes, yes to membership. Today's forum is CMC's annual Mary Lazarus Legacy in Civic Engagement Forum. So today's a super special day. We're celebrating women in society. Mary Lazarus helped to found CMC in 1976, and we celebrate her legacy with today's program. Thank you, Mary! And I hope that the camera's panned over to the beauty in blue at that table. Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you to today's sponsors as well, Bricker and Eckler, King Business Interiors, and Keep Financials. And thank you to today's partners, the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, the National Association of Women Business Owners, Columbus. Today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and by ABC6. Let's thank all of our supporting partners in today's forum. Women entrepreneurs have long been a vital part of the world's economy, but they still make up fewer than 20% of American businesses. But who runs the world? Girls. Today's forum will spotlight the challenges being faced and overcome by leading women entrepreneurs and changemakers right here in Central Ohio. So on behalf of today's sponsor, Bricker and Eckler, please welcome our board member, Joelle Kuzam, to introduce today's panel. Knock 'em out.
Thank you, Tony. Bricker and Eckler is proud of its legacy in not only supporting women at our firm, but also helping female clients achieve their goals. Women are helping make big changes in Central Ohio's school districts, boardrooms, and factories, and we couldn't be happier than when we are helping them succeed. On behalf of our co-sponsors and Bricker, please help me in welcoming today's wonderful panel, Chevonne Harris, who's the founder and CEO of ThriveIN, Betty Collins in the middle, director with Brady, Ware, and host of the Inspiring Women podcast, and to my far left, Purba Majumder, who is the CEO of Cybervation Incorporated and the founder of Cool Tech Girls, and our host today, Stacia Naquin, news anchor with ABC6. You can learn more about today's speakers in your forum flyer. Stacia, we look forward to today's conversation.
The women here on this panel today, I'm so excited for you to get to hear from them. I've heard a little bit from them over the last couple of weeks as we've connected ahead of today, and I'm so excited for you to hear what they have to say. I think there's something for all of us to take away. And so we would just want to jump right in and get right to it. I want to start with Purba, down all the way here at the end here. Now, your work is in STEM. You have daughters yourself. And you discovered extra challenges in trying to get them involved in STEM. And in many ways, generationally, you did not expect some of these challenges. Explain the story and how you came up with your nonprofit, why you felt that was important.
Sure. So thank you, everybody, for inviting me today. I'm really excited to be here and really looking forward to this conversation because it's very near and dear to my heart. So I came to this country as an immigrant almost 30 years back to attend graduate school and obviously have had a professional career in technology all through my life. And I have two daughters. Well, now one is working. She graduated last year, and the one is a sophomore in college. So this story goes back when my oldest daughter was in 7th grade. And I was just trying to get her interested into some of the STEM type of classes and just encourage her, because in my family, me and my husband both are from the STEM background, and we have been in this field for a very long time. And even in my family, my father, my brother, everybody is an engineer. So that's came very naturally to me, and I thought that that's something that we should try with them. But to my surprise, she said that that is something that she wasn't interested in because she would be labeled as a nerd and geek, and she will not have any friends in school. And this is like 7th grade. And I was so astonished to hear her response because, obviously I wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't aware of what was going on in the middle school and, some of the synergies there. So I then, thought that we have to do something about it. And I presented the idea of Cool Tech Girls because it was one of those ideas where we want the girls-only type of environment to encourage them. And there were not very many places that were doing that, like these types of programs at that time. So in 2013, we started Cool Tech Girls program with the help of the community members, the companies in the area, and we've been running our program ever since. Thank you.
And it was interesting because that was not something that you expected to hear, because those generational issues, they evolve, they change over time. And Chevonne, I know that's something that you have been trying to let people know about, that the differences and the challenges for Black Gen Z women are different from generations before. Tell us about some of the challenges that Black Gen Z women are facing in the workplace now.
So, spoiler alert, it's actually a lot of the same challenges that we're seeing, which is actually a very frustrating place to try to thrive in. When we talk about tokenism and microaggressions and pay and gender equity and lack of representation across all levels, these are things that our predecessors and fearless women and people have really fought tirelessly and had some great wins over the decades at. But for this generation, particularly for millennial women, what we are finding is that there is a frustration because you think, okay, after 50 years, should I really still have to be having a conversation about pay equity? I'm at a company that's been here around for 60, 70 years. Why am I still the only one in my department? And so there's a frustration that comes with that. And for me, what I have coined it is, the curse of the ambitious woman, or the curse of the ambitious Black woman, which it means, for millennials, we have such a liberated mindset of thinking. We see all these affiliate groups and the advocacy groups. You see the social media memes and all these empowering IG reels, but when you go to function in your day-to-day life, you still realize that there are a lot of barriers still preventing you from getting the success that you know that you deserve. I often say that for women, there is a glass ceiling, and for Black women, it is often double paned. And so for millennials, it's a very interesting place to operate from, having a liberated mindset, but navigating a world that is really still bound by these old age and grandfathered in ideals. It is infuriating. There are women who go through depression because our work, for a lot of us, it gives us a sense of significance and importance. And so to show up every day from 9 to 5, for some of us, it's been 9 to 9, 5 days a week, and to feel, underappreciated and overlooked is very disheartening. But that on the flip side, what gives me hope is actually when I look at the Gen Zers of the world, which I feel old even saying that because I'm a millennial, but I'm like, okay, these kids got it. But the Gen Zers of the world, they are fearless and they are impatient. And so when they see that there are these problems that are still existing, they are knocking down doors. They are saying, this is ours to take. We know that we have the talent, and we're not asking anymore. And so companies especially, I think, are finding themselves in really interesting positions, because when the murder of George Floyd happened in June of 2020, there were a lot of statements. Everyone was Black Lives Matter, and we're looking up 2 years later and saying, what is the quantifiable progress that has happened? And so a lot of people are really holding truth to power in terms of saying, where are the benchmarks? Where we don't want rhetoric. Where is the action? And what has moved the needle? And if it hasn't, if you are not familiar with Black Twitter, they will come after you, and social media will hold you. And Gen Zers and protesters, they will come to the company corporate grounds. they will come to the CEO's house. And so there is a thinking now that really excites me in terms of, again, we're not waiting. We are not asking to be at tables anymore. We see the challenges that have persisted for years, and we are going in and we have a can-do spirit that is unshakable. And so despite all of the problems and all of the isms that a lot of women, and Black women in particular, are facing, there is still some hope, but there is also still a fight on some very, very deep levels.
Betty, I see you nodding your head and hearing about that fearlessness. What excites you about that?
Well, what excites me is when I first met her, she said, "I'm just 38 and I'm exhausted." And I went, "I'm 58. You wait, just wait, right?" No, what excites me about it is it's a continual process, and you don't get to one process and you just stop. It's an ongoing. I mean, I think of Mary Lazarus, the reason she started this. I cannot imagine having to start a lunch so I can be there. Okay, I can't imagine that. Thank you. And so when I hear it that, no, we're still not done and we got things to do, let's keep moving, even though there's been a lot of progress made.
But at the same time, we know that fear is a factor because, Purba, in the research that you have done, you've discovered that 3 out of 4 girls have a fear of failure that stop them from even considering careers outside their thinking. And so STEM careers, they don't even consider it. How do we instill a sense of moving past that fear? How do we do that, Purba?
So, in the research, it shows that the workforce, the women in the workforce are like 57% women in workforce, and out of that, 24% are in STEM type of workforce, which is way below than parity, right? So in order to get parity, we definitely need more girls interested in STEM type of careers because they are the largest group of workers that would be needed, and especially now that we have Intel, we are going to need more. But the reasons that we found, the girls are not so much interested are, multiple different reasons, of course. Everybody comes from a different background. Some of them are not really aware of the opportunities that are going to be available or are available now, the types of programs that are available. But also, we find that so we run a program called Techno-Fashion for middle school girls in our program. It's called Cool Tech Girls, and you can find out more about it, cooltechgirls.org. And that is definitely geared just for middle school girls to address this. And we find that the girls, they start attending the program. So we do 4 workshops in engineering and 4 workshops in Python, like a coding language, and then they have to work on a project. And they would work on the 4 workshops and then do the 4 workshops in coding, and then they would come to a point and they'll say, no, I cannot work on a project because of the fear of failure. Because they don't want to, not have that type of a situation where they were not able to be successful in creating a project, to speak about their project, and all of those things, which is very disheartening. And this we find even with the parents. Some of the parents are saying, no, my daughter cannot do this because they're not ready for it, they cannot do this. So the fear of failure is something that we need to address with our girls, our family members, our neighbors, with our community. Everybody around us should be talking about this, because if you talk about coding, the way I look at it is there is no single way to get the code working the first time. It is very basic to this whole process where you try and try and try and try and fail, and you try but do not give up. So that resiliency has to be built in, that is a character that we need to develop with our girls from early on, from elementary school, middle school, because high school is too late. So that's why we need to have them introduce them to these programs, like STEM type of programs, even if that's something that they do not pursue. Because I don't expect every girl to wake up in the morning and say that, this is what I'm going to do. But at least give it a shot. Try to find out what's out there, and then decide that this is not for me. And And more, even if, there is such a misconception. People think that STEM means, I'm going to be coding Java in front of a computer the whole day. But that's actually not true. Every job that we have in this workplace, it relates to some technology that we use, whether it be HR, whether it be, staffing, it would be like programming, any type of industry, manufacturing, healthcare, everywhere we use technology, whether you are coding or you are using the product, right? So to become aware of what's out there, how I can be a part of that workforce, and to have them, think about those things is really important. So we introduce them to more mentors, more role models, so that they don't think that they're the only ones that, is out there doing this thing, and they think that this is not for me. That's not, something that we should be, that there has to be more awareness. And we all can play a part. I think we can all make an impact in this regard. And because you see Intel coming to Columbus, there is going to be more jobs in this, in the STEM type of field. So the sooner we get them ready, the better for all of us and for them.
Very true. And that resiliency is so important. Encouraging each other is important as well. Betty, in your Inspiring Women podcast, you talk about the importance of using our circle of influences and those venues that we have access to build each other up. But it's not so simple. Why isn't it? It feels like it should be simple to build each other up. Why isn't it simple to build up other women?
Right. So one of the reasons I did that podcast was because there's two problems, well, there's three reasons why we don't do this as well as we could. But the first one really is, we don't see ourselves as the influencers. We don't think we are that circle of influence. We don't see that. We're everyday, we're not Oprah. Very few people are. And you are the influencer, and I don't know that you see that. And so I try to get across to women, you have something you can influence, which means you'll lead and people will follow, or you can have impact. So that's one of the reasons I think it isn't. We don't see ourselves as the influencers. I mean, look at your table, and you're going to go, who's the influencer at the table? You all are. Because the second reason is, we all have a story. We all have a story. We all have it's your journey, right? And when I first started the Women's Initiative in Brady, Ware, I started telling my story to this group of women that I didn't really know. I had just come in and merged in as a partner, and we had our first Women's Initiative conference with all 4 offices, and we sat in this room, kind of like this, 44 of us, and I thought, well, you really don't know me, and I'm going to tell you my story. It's not really a big deal. And so I'm starting to tell them, because they see me in a room with 26 men, and there's 2 of us who are women. I'm just like, it's just my story. I got there, I worked really hard. And they sat and really listened, and then they wanted to know more. Now they wish I would probably not tell my story all the time, but that's okay. We have a story, and somewhere in your story and journey, you have something to give to impact the women at your table. So we don't always do that, right? So you are the influencer. You don't have to be big and amazing and all these things. And at the same time, you've got a story and a journey to share. I mean, I think of Sherry Jones. Sherry Jones, raise your hand. She's the president of NABO this year. She comes to my office with her tax packet one year, and she's got these 4 kids with her standing there as nicely as could be. My admin says, "Are you expecting a big group?" I said, "No." And I go out, and here's these 4 kids standing very nicely, and I'm thinking, how does she do that? Wow. I want to know. I want to know how, that's a big story, because she owns her own companies, and she does all these things. We have a story that we need to think about and know, and then you impact. Probably the best person that had this impact on me was when I first became in Brady, Ware, and I was starting a women's initiative. I joined NABO, and it was because of Caroline Worley. Most of you probably know her. She was so humble about the connections, and she kept introducing me to just simple people every day. And all of a sudden, my network got so much bigger. And she took the time, and that's the third. A lot of times we just don't think we have time, because we're going to do a big plan and take everyone out to dinner and get them all over the place, and I'm going to no, just take your influence that you have and your story and what you know is impactful and help the people at your table. So that's important.
Chevonne, I know you've said we need vested and true allies in the workplace. Tell us what that looks like.
Well, I recently just learned by Dr. Jones that there are allies and advocates, but they're now, scholars are moving to a new term called accomplice. And accomplices are, because an ally, you can post the Black Lives Matter meme and think, whew, I've done my part. People know I'm not racist today. But the and you pat yourself on the back. But the accomplice, it's a verb. You are an active participant in helping your counterpart get the equality that we know that we all as human beings deserve. And so what that looks like is if I, as a Black woman, am speaking to my superior and making factual claims about why I deserve a raise, then you, as a white person, woman, man, whatever, are you holding your leadership accountable and saying, hey, Bob, I'm just curious, what does the pay equity scale look like among our employees here at the company? That's something that your employer should be very open about having a conversation with if this is somewhere that is truly vested in creating an inclusive workspace. And so, again, the rhetoric is great and it is welcomed, and I think it has gotten us to a point, but we are also at a point where we need action. And we you know, people of color, we can't be the only ones, and women can't be the only ones. You know, it is a marathon, and the best marathons are run not by yourself, but we are passing the baton. And so what I'm expecting, and when I tell people we need allies and advocates, is I can't be the only one tired who is here fighting the good fight. Because let's also be honest, when you empower the minority, the majority get the ripple effect of that, all the benefits of that. And so what are the conversations that we are all having around equity, around true leadership, you know, looking at the board of directors and posing the question of, you know, what percentage is women? What percentage are people of color? When we look at the elite spaces of an organization, do they really reflect the communities that we serve, and are they diverse in perspective, race, gender, and a lot of other things? And so again, when I say we need allies and advocates, we need people who can be just a little bit more fearless and take their rhetoric a step further to really hold those in power to really make some actual changes, because we are at a point now where, again, you know, they'll say talk is cheap, and it is. It is. What is expensive and what is really the investment is really being active in that movement. And the other thing that I'll say, Betty, I think you made some great points in terms of how we as women can really support one another. But what we also have to keep in mind too is that yes, we are all united by our womanhood, and you know, girl power is great. But we also, there is a very stark truth that we have to admit, that all minorities don't always support each other. And so in a room full of women, there is still an unspoken hierarchy. And so when we are in these empowering spaces, are we taking a step to say, okay, this works for women, but how does this impact Black women? And is there a Black woman and Black women who are part of that decision-making circle who can really offer that diverse perspective? And so again, allyship and advocacy and accomplices, we just have to go deeper beyond, you know, that one step. And it requires people sometimes to get a little uncomfortable, but you'll be okay. You know, no, I promise you will be okay, because that's really what we need. We need action, and we need active participants in this fight for equity and inclusion.
How do we make that quantifiable?
That is a great question, by making it quantifiable. In terms of what are the benchmarks, I think that corporations, I work with a lot of companies, and they'll come to ThriveIN. We have a job board, and we can, you know, work with companies to be an extension of their D&I practices. And I always go in and ask the questions. I say, well, what is your retention rate for Black women? Or they'll say, you know, we're at this career fair, and we've talked to X amount of Black women. Well, how many were hired? And are you meeting Black women and people of color where they are? You know, when we look at what are the audits that we're doing across the board to look at pay, again, a very clear indicator of inclusion, of allyship, is looking at the leadership of a company, looking at who has true power to authorize decisions, and are they, and is it, and that is very quantifiable in terms of, is it diverse? You know, a lot of people get the D and the I right, that diversity and inclusion. Those are the easy parts. But when we talk about equity, we have to have benchmarks in place. We have to have goals in place, short and long term, across pay, across gender, across race, across employee sentiment. Are you speaking to your employees annually, quarterly, and just getting a sense of how they feel? And what does that look like? And the great thing is there are templates out there, there are scorecards out there, there are companies who are doing it right, there are amazing consultants who can help companies do it, but it has to be quantifiable, because again, we can all talk, but who really knows where that goes?
Purba, when it comes to diversity in STEM, what are the conversations happening right now? Not just about getting girls, but getting women of color and getting everyone involved. What are the conversations happening?
So I think that one of the things that we find oftentimes is there can be girls or families coming from a background where they're not used to thinking about STEM, or they don't have anybody in their families, and that is a group of girls we work with, and we try to talk to them about that this is an opportunity for them. Let's look at this as an opportunity. And there has to be more talk about that with those groups of people. And that's because their parents are in a different industry. They probably do not know what the future looks like or what the opportunities might be in that field. And so that is, and even in my business, we do staff augmentation. We're constantly looking for women in IT. We do healthcare staffing, we do IT staffing. But in healthcare, it's much easier. It's mostly women, honestly, because we do RNs, LPNs, and NPs. But in IT, we try to seek them out, but there's not that many. And that's a real problem, because women, when you talk about diversity, why it's important is that people coming from diverse backgrounds come with different kind of perspectives, different kinds of mindsets. And when you have a field, when you have like any workplace, when you have all these people express their ideas, you are going to have more opportunities, more options, better solution that's going to be better suited for everybody. So that's the importance of diversity and inclusion, and having people from different backgrounds, whether they're immigrants or whether they're minorities within this country. Everybody has got a different way that they grew up, so they bring those values, those things to the table that somebody over here might not even think of. So that's the importance.
Betty, in your podcast, I think this topic is really important. You've discussed keeping emotion out of difficult conversations and how this can be an especially important topic for women. I know if I feel really passionately about something, it's hard to keep emotion out of it. So tell us about the power of tell me more.
So what I find is, and I'll just be honest with you, I'm either like, so no confidence, and I'm over here on this end of the scale, or hey, I'm Betty Collins. so either one of those spectrums, if you have people like that in your life, it's exhausting, right? It's exhausting. I am an exhausting person, I will tell you. So when I'm frustrated with conversations that don't go well, or I don't get the results or the impact, sometimes it's because my way that I navigated through that conversation was more on emotion than my end result of what I wanted, right? These are the end results. So in February, my husband has a birthday on the 29th. And it's a big deal because it's a leap year baby, right? And it's a big deal. And so we had these long things and on and on. And this year, I just said, I know I need to do this party. I need to have the kids. I need to pick up my mom. I need to do, we do this as women, right? Instead, I said, why are you, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm having the conversation in my head. And I said, why am I doing that? And so I got up and I said, we're gonna go to dinner. We're gonna have a really nice steak. And I told my children, who are adults with jobs and on their own, if you wanna acknowledge your stepdad, great, do what you gotta do. And Mom, we're not having a party. I took all the emotion out of it. That weekend came and went. Everyone survived. He was happy. He had his steak. It all worked. That's a very simple example, but that could apply, to a lot of everyday decisions. The emotion of the roller coaster dictates instead of the end result needs to be this. Now, I'm really glad I'm a CPA, especially after listening to the coding that you do. I can't imagine it. So I am a fairly logical person, but common sense and logic in your decision making, not only you only might get the outcome and put the drama and the emotions over here, you're gonna probably be perceived differently and you're gonna be looked at differently. So when you're having these conversations, I'm having conversations with my board, who's two women and 26 men. Now it's 7 women and total of 21 in the boardroom, so 39%. They're conversations that sometimes you just have to step back and take the emotion out of it. You will get more results. There's a time for passion. It didn't mean I didn't have passion about more women being in the boardroom at Brady Ware. It didn't mean that. It just was, let's just cut to the chase, because I knew my audience. And so if you want those results sometimes, you gotta take that out of that. Then there's a time to get like crazy mad if you want and go through all that. But it's exhausting. It's kind of like the person who either is very insecure or Betty Collins. It's both ways. So we have the conversations, if we're gonna have progress, if we're gonna keep moving, there's time for emotion, but I think there's more time for passion and logic as you get through it. So that's what.
Why do you think that's especially an important topic for women in particular?
Because they just do it more than men. So women are more emotional at times, depends on the dynamics of who you know, right? I will tell you, men, and this is a compliment, goes right here. And they're done, they're over it, they go. We're still getting sucked down in it, we're still in the emotional part of it, we're still taking the energy that we need is gone. And so men are better at, let's do this. Now, we won't talk the other side of that today, but we could do that another time. But so it's important, and women have a bigger struggle with it. They just do.
Chevonne, we look at everything that is in front of us and all that we want to accomplish for ourselves, for the women beside us, and you've said being at the table is not enough. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think getting to the table can sometimes be too hard. And I shouldn't be burnt out by the time I get to the table, because really that's where the real work and the real impact is going to happen. And I even look at myself in my own career. I'm 34 years old, and I was a part of the Great Resignation, because for me, what had happened was after 10 years at a company, I looked up and I said, okay, I feel like I'm kind of on like a professional Peloton journey where I'm running, and the scenes in front of me, it looks like things are changing and I look like I'm really going somewhere, but then I get off and I'm still stagnant in the same place that I am, trying to reach this, elusive table that I know I'm qualified and talented enough to be at. And so for me, I said, I'm too young to be burnt out. There are still things that I want to do. I still have all this energy, and so I will go and create my own table. But for entrepreneurship is not for everyone. There's some stability and some great things that can happen with having a 9-to-5 and a traditional job. But again, to get to this seat of what we have dubbed of importance and of the elitism of kind of who are the change makers and the drivers of the world, everyone has that power, and everyone can do that in their respective remit. But to get that power and to be ignited, it shouldn't take all that it takes. And a lot of times for Black women in particular, it can take a lot to will yourself up to try to fight that fight, because we know very clearly what are the barriers that we are going to see across every single level. And so it can be exhausting to even get to the table. The other thing that I'll say in terms of being at the table is think about Thanksgiving dinner. You go, you make your plate, and you sit down and you eat your meal. When we are talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we cannot have that mindset. It is not enough to be at the table and make your plate and sit down and say, okay, that was a great meal, mission accomplished. No. Do other people who don't look like you, who are not in the same positions as you, who have different perspectives, do they have that same meal? And is it as great and as grandiose for them? True inclusion and true equity is exponential. It does not stop at the table. And so to do that, you have to have, again, I keep going back to it in terms of equity, but you have to have diversity and perspectives and race and gender and creed and beliefs to make sure that there is true representation. Because really, there is not one table. True success and true progress is, if I don't want to be at your table, awesome, but do I have what I need to go create my own table to invite other women and to create change in my remit and beyond me? And so again, it's not enough to just sit there and grab the torch and say, whew, I've done what I need to do. But can the person next to you, or the woman who doesn't look like you, can they say that exact same thing? And if they can't, you still have work to do.
I'd like to add to that if I could.
Please do.
When I ran for the board of directors in Brady Ware, there had never been a woman on the board of directors. And so we ran, and you had to go through this whole process with a speech. And when they said to me in the room, we were all in the room, and they said, well, I think Betty Collins should run. And I said, oh, I'm never going to do that. So when it came restroom break time, and all of us 4 women who were in that boardroom said, you absolutely will do this, and you will do it for the women of this company. I said, there's a lot of smarter people in there, and that's where we're over here, right? Instead of, I'm not Betty Collins right now. But when I went in and did my speech, and I had to go first, I had to set the tone, I went in as Betty Collins. And they said, it'll take 2 or 3 rounds of voting because this has to happen. I won in the first round. Okay? Now, I say that because when I was ready to get to, I had to have on a different frame of mind to be at that table. And then when you're at the table, I think you have 3 options. You can sit and look at the menu. That's called a wasted seat. You're not going to order. You're not going to do anything. You can throw your food. Nobody likes that. You can have a nice steak and be part of it and get engaged. And so when we are at the table, and I was one of the few women at that time in the room, you have a responsibility to act a certain way at that table, and so that more of you can be there. And now that we have a boardroom with 7 out of 21, or a shareholder group, the conversation is different. So that's where you want to get to. I'm no longer on the board because we want the next generation. I'm older. I'm not old, but I'm older. And so you have to let that next generation, but you had to be the example, and then you had to make sure that other people were going to actually want to be on that board and come along with you. I just wanted to add that too.
We're going to move to questions from our live stream and also the in-person audience in just a moment. So if you do have a question for our panel, I hope you'll make your way to the microphone. But as everybody's kind of getting in place to take these final questions, I want to put out a call to action from each of you. Purba, lead us off and give us that call to action for what's most important to you.
Like Betty said, the way we motivate a woman is not the same way we motivate a man, right? So the same thing applies to the STEM field. So we all have to find different ways of motivating our girls, the girls in our lives. Because if we empower them and if we make them aware of all these different opportunities, it is just good for the community. So we all have a role to play, whether you have a daughter or you have a niece or you have somebody around you that's a little girl. We always want to tell them that they can do these things. There is no such thing as failing. They can do different things, and we all have a responsibility as a community to really talk to the members of the community, or even the young woman who came out of the college to, in a company, in their first job or whatever, that they are capable of doing all these different things. It might look different for the young woman who is joining now, but we just have to, like Betty said, that we all have an influence, we all can make an impact. I think we should all try to do that every day in our lives to send that message and find a role model and connect them.
I've gotten to do a lot of great things, and part of it has been that I've been an owner of Brady, Ware, and I've had that venue. But it started a long time ago, and so I would challenge you in the room. I was never going to be an accountant. I was never, or use my accounting degree, I had to choose a major. I was never going to get my CPA license. I was never going to be a business owner because I wanted somebody to give me a check. I didn't want to sign one, and I would never work for a larger company. Had I never done those things, I would have missed all my opportunities, where I've gotten to have a really cool venue, where I've gotten to be impactful. So when you say to yourself, I'm never going to do that, you're missing an opportunity. And so I would challenge you to think about that. Right now, I am telling my producer of my podcast, who said, you can do a podcast. And I said, I have nothing to say. She goes, no, you talk a lot, but you have stuff to say. I said, okay. And she's challenged me to write a book, and the first words out of my mouth were, I'm never going to write a book. Don't miss your opportunity because you're in that never mind. You have things to accomplish and to do. So,
Chevonne?
I would say for me, when we talk about, changing the world and inclusion and equity and diversity and, disrupting in the best ways possible, these are big problems to solve, and they can't be done in silos. And so when I say, it's time to take allyship and advocacy into being an accomplice, really challenge yourself to get active. Is the work that I'm doing rippling and resonating to others beyond me? Because that's what changing the world is. And, it ebbs and flows, and there are levels for different people, but when I leave a company, have I done enough to mentor someone else to empower her so she can get a little further than I did? You know, when I am in these spaces and at these tables and in these rooms, am I speaking on behalf of people who do not have the privilege that I have or may not have the mic at that moment? Because again, when we talk about change makers and disrupting, you know, there is a responsibility. To whom much is given, much is required. And we all operate from some level of privilege, whether, and it differs for each of us. But how am I using that for the greater good to really leave a change that resonates beyond me? And how can I also admit to myself that I know what I know, and what I don't know, I do not know. And so, again, no one is coming to the table and asking people to be race and feminist scholars and all of these things. We are asking you to be open-minded and to lean into this idea of equality. And so if that is not your area of expertise, do you have it in yourself to humble yourself and say, who are the subject matter experts, who are the influencers in this space, who I can pull into these circles, who can really help to get some change making done? Because that is also power as well, knowing when to take a step back and when to let the proper people really do their job to really get the momentum going. And so again, you know, allyship and advocacy is cool, but now for this generation, let's now be an active accomplice in terms of what does it mean to empower and inspire other women to go out and be change makers for themselves.
It is CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions, and we've got Lainey Cuthbert of CMC curating questions from the live stream audience, and we have our in-house folks as well. So Lainey, what is our first question?
From our online audience, we're asking, how do we involve the male standard bearers in this conversation when we kind of look around, and thank you gentlemen who are here, but there's not many here.
I can tell you right now that in Brady Ware, without a women's initiative would have never happened without the men on that board saying, yes, we're all in. And they did. And so they were partners. I mean, we joked around about it, and when I first was doing this, the co-CEO said to me, and he caught himself because he said, well, yeah, you're just so, it's like, I said, you don't see me as a woman, I don't see you as a man. Okay, so right now we have one thing to accomplish, and they were, I mean, a lot of resources and have allowed a lot of time. They are my partners, and they don't need to be replaced necessarily, but they were partners from the beginning with something called a women's initiative, which was intentional, and the results of it have been intentional. So you embrace that.
Hi, I'm Judge Marilyn Zayas. So I went to a STEM school. I was an IT manager. That was my first career. I was never going to be an attorney. And I am the fourth woman and the fourth woman elected to my Court of Appeals and the first Latina elected to any Court of Appeals in Ohio. I have never experienced bias as I have as a judge. And I speak a lot to young adults, and one of the questions that in the last year I have gotten the most is, what do you do in order to not lose your bearings? And I have my answer for that, but I want to get your answers for that.
I think that community comes into play with that, especially when you are the only one in certain places. Who are, you know, what is your sisterhood? And what is your tribe? Who are those people around you who from 9 to 5 you have all of this, who can just reaffirm you and ground you? I think that that is so important. And even in settings like this, that we really lean into that idea of womanhood and sisterhood and just empowering one another as before even we go out, so we can all get grounded in our why. I think is very, very important. And then also just day to day, remember your why. Because a lot of times it's a lot bigger, and that reason of why you even got into whatever the industry is a lot bigger than the challenges before you. And a lot of times you're fighting the good fight to end the challenges for the next people who come behind you or who can come up alongside you or that you can pull up. And so again, you have to get rooted in it's a daily practice. Sometimes it's an hourly practice, depending on the meeting that you've had, to just reaffirm yourself and remember your why. And again, get sisters and women around you who, if you forget, they are tapping you on the shoulder in the group chat and they're saying, no, you got this. Don't listen to what these crazy men are saying or whomever is saying this. You can do it. You know you are talented. You know you are qualified. Because I truly believe that no one can hype another woman up like another woman. And so that, I think, will really help. And it's like a breath of fresh air when there's just so much kind of combating a lot of that.
My mom always said, when you can't get it together, false cheer is better than real crabbiness. Put your smile on. And I've done that many times when I just can't get my bearings. There we go, right? And sometimes it just pulls you out. Don't live in denial, but sometimes it pulls you out.
I was in radio and television for a long time. When I graduated OSU in 1964, I got a job at a TV station in marketing. When I was pregnant 2 years later, I was told, you can't work when you're pregnant. And there really weren't any women who were having children at that time. 13 years later, I went to work for another television station. There were not that many women. As we look around now, and I don't know whether it's your activism or whose activism, but there aren't any laws that say there must be women in television on the air, but there are, and most of them are very good. Now I see that the NFL owners have passed rules saying they must have somebody of minority qualifications on their boards, in their management. Will this help women and people of color, or is this just more talk?
I think that it helps, but I think the fight does not stop there. I think that that is often what can kind of prolong the journey and the fight to getting us really into equal representation in these spaces, is we say, okay, we have one. We have potentially our first Black female Supreme Court judge. Whew, we're done, you know, which is awesome, and I'm so excited for that. But my heart also goes out to her sometimes, because as some of us know, being the only one, there's a tremendous burden that comes with that. There's a lot of stress that comes with that. And you have to reaffirm and encourage yourself daily a lot of times, because you are, you know, to no fault of yours and you didn't ask, but you're carrying the hopes and dreams of so many other people. And so that idea of lifting and reaching as we climb is more than rhetoric. It's truly important. And so I think that if we are the women to get into these spaces and to get on these boards, you know, it is our responsibility to say, how am I paying it forward? And also, how am I looking back and bringing other people alongside with me? And so again, I think that it is great and it is very important, and I do count those as wins when we get in those spaces, but we also have to be very clear. These are century-old issues that will not be solved in just one appointment or one, you know, female board of director. And so the fight does not stop. And so we have to keep challenging those in positions of power. We have to keep having conversations with people who don't look like us. And, you know, just continuing, you know, the marathon continues, you know, in the words of Nipsey Hussle. It is an ongoing fight, but it is a step in the right direction.
So I want to pick up a little bit on the question that Lainey asked. I'm Jane Scott with the Metropolitan Club. I started my career in 1975 for an agricultural company, and I was the first and only woman that they had hired with an ag degree. So I understand, Betty, understand where you're coming from. My biggest champions in my life have been my dad, my brothers, who I grew up with, who made me tough, and my male bosses, who had a stake in wanting to see me succeed because they took a risk in hiring a woman. I just get really concerned, and I want to know the answer. How many of our women's organizations have men on their boards? Because I think in order for us to be using the 50% or the 100% of the resources that we have to turn around and be mentors to younger men as well as just younger women, because they can learn a great deal from us about how to work with their women colleagues. And I have a couple of young men that I consider mentees, and I learned so much from them. So just curious about your comments about some of those things.
So I have a similar experience when I was working in the corporate world in the field of technology. At that time, there were not that many women. Like nowadays, you see more. All the people in my team were male members, but it never occurred to me that they were men and I'm female. Like they're friends to me. And they helped me so much throughout my career. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's not always like, you know, I'm a woman, so I'm different, but also to think that I'm equal. I can do these things. I can learn from them. They can help me. So they can also be the champions. They can also be the, you know, sponsors. And that is so important. Even with young women, the dads and all the other male members in their community, in their network, play a big role because they look up to them. and they listen to them. So it's very important that the male allies, or whatever we might call them, they play a big role in our lives.
One final question.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike Davis with Junior Achievement here in Columbus. We work with 30,000+ young people a year. Half of those are young women. One of our programs is 5th grade, where young people apply to be CEOs and CFOs and run businesses. We have a dynamic where often women and people in lower socioeconomic situations don't even apply to be the CEOs of these businesses, because they don't feel that they're ready or able. And I wanted to pick up on Purba's point about we've got to go early. So many kids have their own view of themselves by the time they're in 8th and 9th and 10th grades that they often check out. So my question to you is, what was the moment when you saw that you had it? And then just to echo the point, please work with young women way before they get into their careers, because we need to do this much earlier than we have been.
I had two pivot moments probably. One was when I was 14. And my mother looked at me and said, she babysat kids in the house. That was her job. She did not get to go to college, kind of her choice. And she said, "You will not do what I've done." I said, "Okay." And everything was very logical. So I got that logical conversation from my mom's side. She said, "So you're going to go to college and you're going to do something that will get you a job. And here's a work permit. You need to fill this out because college costs money." I will never forget that conversation. I just thought, oh, I've got to pay for college. I mean, I got to get this going. I'm 14. And so I thought, okay. She laid it out in such simple terms to me. I was 14. And I worked for what I call the Five Guys. I'm going to do a podcast on it, but probably at the end of my career. I don't know how they'll like it. But I worked for 5 different men, and they were all champions of me. And women, they saw in me what I didn't see. Shame on me. Because they directed me in great paths, did nothing wrong. But if I would have seen it, what would the path been like? So then, that was 14. Now I'm 38. And I'm like, this is my path. And so I'm glad my mom had a very direct conversation with me. And the first company I worked for, I was the only woman. In every retreat, it was a big joke that I was the only woman in the room. I didn't even think about it. I go to my next place, I'm the only woman there. And I've been there since 1988. But my point is that you have to see, and you can't just have others see it for you, but you need guidance. My mom was a great guide. She's 85, she just turned 85, and she'll tell me now, you women have gone way too far. Okay. I'm like, okay, Mom. But I mean, you have to see it. And so you got to get people in your lives that help you see who you are. Like Betty Clark, who said, you need to do a podcast. I don't have anything to say. And she was like, no, you got this. So we have to come and embrace that to go forward.
I wish we had more time for more questions. I know I could talk to them all day, literally. But I want to bring back up Tony right now.
Well, hey, everybody. I want to say thank you on behalf of the CMC, a big thank you to Chevonne Harris, Betty Collins, and Purba Majumder. I hope you found today's forum informative enough for you to engage with intention and support women entrepreneurs and change makers. I learned that it's important for us all to be allies, advocates, and fearless accomplices, and to see yourself as the influencer willing to say, tell me more, and be willing to do something about that more that you've been told. Kind of like following in the footsteps of Mary Lazarus and team. So please join us next week. Please join us next Wednesday for Changing Demographics. Our Changing Demographics are creating a new Central Ohio with Michael Wilkos, Senior Vice President of Community Impact at the United Way of Central Ohio, and the amazing Autumn Glover, Senior Director for Community Health Partners with Ohio Health. Thank you for joining us for the Mary Lazarus Legacy in Civic Engagement Forum. Thank you for today's sponsors, Bricker and Eckler, King Business Interiors, Keep Financials, and today's forum partners, the Women's Fund of Central Ohio and the National Association of Women Business Owners. Thank you to our online and virtual patrons and to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation, with the Columbus Dispatch and ABC6. And our special appreciation, once again, big old round of applause to today's speakers, Purba Majumder, Betty Collins, and Chevonne Harris. Thank you for joining us. We could not do this without each and every one of you because we are better together. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday as the Columbus Metropolitan Club presents yet another vitally important community conversation. Have a great day.